1. The Rules Committee will come to order. This is an important day for the cause of ending hunger in this country, and it's personal to me. My first involvement in the movement to end food insecurity began when I was a student interning for Senator George McGovern, no relation. He was the chair of the Special Select Committee on Hunger and Nutrition. I watched him champion these issues in a bipartisan way, along with leaders like Senators Bob Dole. He saw the face of hunger in the United States, and he did not look away. He did something about it, and that always stuck with me. And I promised myself that I would never look away either. Every person who's stopped me on the street, every mother who visited my office to tell me about their struggle to put food on the table has stuck with me. I have seen how hunger makes it harder to love.
That I have learned is that, and Ms. Reynolds asked the question, what is she was talking about safety nets. We've had the opportunity after all years of asking ourselves not that long ago, what is the role of a safety net? And in our case, a safety net hospital. Is it in fact charity exclusively into perpetuity, or is it equity? And I would say the difference between the two is, we've had, as I mentioned in my remarks, over 40 programs in our hospital. But what has been the role of the hospitals? What of those programs? What they mainly do is fill the gaps that people have. We're preventing people from falling down. We're preventing people from, falling off the cliff. The intentionality of those programs has not necessarily been to eliminate the gaps, because I believe that only through eliminating those gaps is it possible for people to become self-sufficient, have financial security, economic mobility, and even opportunities to build wealth. So I think a lot of it is, what is the intentionality of our resources and our subsidies? And when I think about, for example, let's just take public housing, for example. And I think subsidies are fine, but I think they are designed to fill a gap for people. I think we could do better if we designed them for people to become self-sufficient and have financial security versus penalize them for trying to do so. You're limited as to how much income you can earn living in public housing without losing the housing. And I'm not suggesting that people should have these low-cost housing units into perpetuity, but I don't believe that at all. But I think that they should be designed to enable them to be like the rest of us and able to, move forward in life, move up in life, to change socioeconomic status, change socioeconomic lanes, to get out of the line of need, so that ultimately, by having financial security and economic mobility, you're actually able to contribute to the GDP, for example, or contribute to the economy versus relying on it. Because when we don't take that opportunity to be able to provide that sort of pathway and life-altering trajectory for people, we wind up having to subsidize to take care of them anyway. And so on some level, I think monetarily, we all could, it's a win-win situation all the way around. So, and the last example I'll use is during the height of COVID, when we had the $600 unemployment, payment for people. But the exchange for that was to remove SNAP. And so I think that doesn't really help anyone. I think if all of us imagine ourselves, if we had $600, it's not like now we have enough to thrive. It's basically just people surviving. So I think the main thing is intentionality, to move from filling gaps to eliminating them and aiming for financial security and economic mobility and opportunities for people to build wealth, and to not choose pathways or make decisions for others that we would not make for ourselves or our families, because we all want the exact same thing, which is thriving and being able to contribute to the betterment of our country and our economy.
Thank you very
And I'll
much.
just add on to what Dr. James.
Ms. Reynolds, okay. I'll get to everybody, but Ms. Reynolds, go ahead.
Great. I'll just add on to what Dr. James said. To address hunger, I feel like we as a country have got to address poverty, because the realities is that, people walking through the doors, trying to receive safety net programs, walking through the doors of social service agencies, they are coming there for today's needs. But I can't tell you how many times when I was at Catholic Charities Fort Worth and would work intake, the humiliation that often was present with the ask and the outreach for whatever was needed. And people want a life outside of poverty. People deserve a life outside of poverty. And so I think if we could solve this in a comprehensive way, where we're not just looking at solving hunger, but solving upward mobility and creating economic opportunities for Americans, I think it will go a whole lot further. Might be a little more pricey at first, but I think will save our country so much in the long run by what it will achieve for our nation.
Thank you. Dr. Schwarzenbach.
Yeah, of course, broad-based economic growth is going to be our best friend in terms of eliminating hunger. But I want to sort of remind everyone that a large fraction of people on SNAP are working, and they're working a lot, and they're in, what we think of as, good jobs. They're health aides, they're cashiers, they're cooks, but we haven't seen wage growth in that aspect of the economy in a very long time. And so I think, of course, it's appropriate for SNAP to come alongside and make sure that they have enough to eat. But without question, as the economy grows, as we see the wages improve, see more people become employed, the cost of these programs will go down because people won't need them anymore. But it's just the economy, you've got to start there.
Thank you. Ms. Curry.
Yeah, for me, I think if we could find any silver lining in the pandemic, it's with our nonprofit, we were able to build out this program that, in my opinion, does show economic growth and the cyclical nature of what happens when we do solve hunger. And for us, I feel like with solving hunger, we've also been able to solve other issues when it comes to restaurants and farming, which are so important. And so for us, we built out this infrastructure where, we were able to have restaurants get back into business because they were providing the food for the community, and the farmers were providing the produce for the restaurants. And so it was this big cyclical nature and effort that I think has really worked. And I think it's just going to require a big, giant meeting of the minds with Congress and the White House to really figure out how to build out a plan for everybody in their small communities. And I think that sometimes we're thinking so big picture that we forget to think small like this and have people start in their own communities and build out a program that way. And I think that if you were to use something as a model, I think what we've built in partnership with World Central Kitchen has actually been working out here. So it'd be interesting for you all to take a look at it and see how it's worked, because I feel like it's something we could implement many places across the nation. So.
And I think, I think that's a good point. I mean, I've seen lots of initiatives throughout my travels that are really quite extraordinary. I mean, Dr. James, I've been to Boston Medical Center many times. I've seen your food pantry and I've seen your growth clinic, and it's like, I really love it. And I say, why doesn't every hospital do this, right? And you see these and lots of different initiatives in different areas that one wonders whether they could be expanded, but obviously it takes some seed money to help others to be able to follow suit. Some of it can be replicated, some of it can't. But one of the things we hope to look at is like, what is right now working, whether on a large scale or small scale, and if it's on a small scale, how can we replicate it? I appreciate too the fact that everybody, all the witnesses, are reminding us that a lot of the people who are hungry in this country work. I sit on the Agriculture Committee, and a great source of frustration for me has been that during debates on the Farm Bill, when we talk about SNAP, I'm not sure that fact is appreciated, because people usually say, we should have people go and get a job. Well, the bottom line is, the majority of those who are able-bodied who can work are working, and they still earn so little they qualify for SNAP. So these people are doing everything they can, to try to, get ahead, but they can't. And then you add to the equation the cost of housing, and then you add, the cost of healthcare, and then you add, transportation costs to and from. I mean, it becomes overwhelming. All right, so it's not as simple as people who are on SNAP just need to go out and get a job. The majority of people on SNAP, by the way, are children, right? But of those able-bodied adults, people work. And I think so much of our discussion has been very punitive. I mean, it's been, we want to put another, if you're an able-bodied adult without a dependent, you can only be on SNAP for 3 months. And if you're not in a work training program and don't have a job, then you're off for 3 years. Like, as if somehow if you're hungry, you're going to be more employable, or you're going to be able to find a job easier. It just, so I appreciate the fact that everybody here has made the point that, this doesn't fall into these, you've helped correct, I think, what is a false narrative. I should also point out, for the record, when people say, oh, you guys just want to expand government programs. Well, there may be a need for expansion, or there may be a need for consolidation, or thinking out of the box, reimagining, how we do this. I mean, that's, those are perfectly legitimate areas of discussion. But, if people are really concerned about the bottom line and the dollars and cents, I mean, there is a cost to hunger, right? There is a cost to the status quo. Ms. Curry talked about children, and I mean, children who are hungry cannot learn. I mean, that school meal is every bit as vital to that child's ability to learn as a textbook or a laptop. I mean, if you're hungry, you can't focus. If you're a worker who's hungry, you're not productive in the workforce. And there was a 2014 study that found that food insecurity costs an estimated $178 billion with a B, dollars that year in direct healthcare costs, lost work time, and additional education expenditures. And Dr. James mentioned in Massachusetts, it was a Children's Health Watch, they did a study that said in Massachusetts, hunger costs at least $2.4 billion a year in health-related expenditures alone due to poor health, pulmonary disease, diabetes, mental health, obesity, and more. This is a healthcare issue too. And yet a big chunk of our healthcare industry does not treat this issue, Dr. James, as Boston Medical Center does, for example. How do we change that? How do we get, I learned that if I want to become a doctor, then I go through medical school not to have to take any courses in nutrition. I mean, food is medicine. I mean, it's like how, I learn how to prescribe a pill, but I don't learn how to tell you to live a healthier lifestyle so that, you don't have to be on all these pills. You don't get these chronic diseases. But anyway, I've got some more questions, but I want to yield to my ranking member, Mr. Cole, at this point, and then I'll get back to you. But thank you again for your wonderful opening statements.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I agree with you. Very good opening statements, very robust discussion. I just posit, I don't think there's much doubt that a rapidly growing economy is kind of a precondition. It's not an end-all and be-all, but it helps when you had, as we did pre-COVID, the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, the fastest or the highest consumer confidence in a generation. And we saw literally fast wage growth at the lower end of the spectrum. So that's something we need. And it's the first, but not the only way of dealing with. But, even when that was happening, we still had hunger in the United States. We still had problems that the country faced. And we were still spending considerable amount of resources on all this. And I'm not arguing that we shouldn't do that. But I'm not sure we're very good at program design when it comes to dispensing those resources and getting them where people need. So a lot of people on this panel have really extraordinary experience in program design. Ms. Reynolds, let me start, if I may, with you, because you studied this in a whole variety of contexts, from the nonprofit side through the academic research, variety of states, different people in different circumstances. We've got, again, an enormous number of programs, and I'm not saying we only need one program. There are different aspects of poverty that you need to treat, and I think that takes care of a lot of the problem with food insecurity. If people aren't poor, they're able to go get what they need. So if you had to look at our federal programs in particular and pick out some principles that you would say, okay, if I'm designing a program that's going to effectively, number one, get somebody out of poverty and put them in a position to be food secure, what are the sorts of principles I would, focus on? What are the things I would do, or what would be the lessons I've learned that I would try to avoid, or try to learn from, try to avoid mistakes we've made in the past?
Well, great question. Thank you for presenting that to me. I think first is, and we kind of hit on it earlier, we need to understand what our goal is in each of these federal programs. And then from there, understand, did we achieve the intended goal? So let me give you just a very simple example. All across the nation, there are these call centers. In communities, they're called 211 or 311 lines. People in need in communities can call those to find out, where they can get utility assistance or rent assistance if they're about to be evicted. So they're for people who have had a big crisis. And all across the United States, we offer these. Yet it was really interesting to us because as we at Leo kind of started looking into some of these call centers, what we learned is the goal of the call centers were to prevent homelessness, yet really how the call center was tracked as being productive and hitting their goals was the numbers of calls they answered. And so it was really exciting to us because one of these call centers in the city of Chicago actually is run by Catholic Charities in Chicago there. And so they asked us to come in and to do a study so we could understand, did the call center who was answering calls, who were giving out assistance to people who were about to be homeless, did the call center, did the support work? And so what we were able to do through a quasi-experimental design at Leo is we were able to evaluate this program, and we were able to show that those who received the funds saw an 88% decline in being homeless after 3 months and a 76% decline after 6 months. And so what this meant was the goal of the call center is to prevent homelessness, and it actually works. The research shows that it works. And so that would be an example of, if the goal is to prevent homelessness, investing in emergency financial assistance programs across our nation are a really great thing to do. But then again, if the goal is something different, such as community college completion, an example of that is a project we ran called Stay the Course at Leo. And this was comprehensive case management to get people to complete community college so they could increase their earnings for the long haul. The goal of this program was completion. And so the intervention that was needed here was entirely different. We didn't need emergency financial assistance. That may have been a little part of the intervention, but what was needed was comprehensive navigation and support, is what the evidence showed, in order to drive the intended outcome that we wanted to have, which was completion. And so, Ranking Member Cole, the way I would just explain it is, in each of these programs, we have to know what is our intended impact, and then we have to build evidence to know, does this specific intervention achieve the intended impact of that program?
Well, you're clearly doing that from a, again, nonprofit standpoint. Do you, in your experience, which is considerable, you see us doing that in government very much? In other words, going back, and we all talk about this as members of Congress in our respective committees. We try and legislate, but I don't think we very often go back to see if the legislation we passed actually works or the program we created. We just don't get a lot of feedback, I think, sometimes. We just get caught up in what the next thing is. Do you see some efforts in the federal government or something you could point us to that we would like build in? And we all know we have a government accounting agency. We use them from time to time.
Yep.
I think they do very good work for us, but I don't know that we systematically evaluate all these different programs to decide, hey, this one's really working great. We should probably invest more money in it.
Well,
This one, maybe not. Maybe that money should be diverted over here.
Yep.
Do you see much of that?
You know, I think that's what you have economists like we have at Notre Dame or Northwestern or other places across our country who want to do this work and answer those questions for you. An example that I could point to is the Housing First model. This all started through some experimentation that was going on in New York City, where we in New York, folks were saying, oh my goodness, like 10% of the homeless in New York were taking up about 90%-ish of the resources. And so what kind of came from that is some studying to understand more, some RCTs that were run. And then ultimately, under President George W. Bush, the Housing First initiative was born and funded in a big way across our nation. And then it was expanded under President Obama to include HUD-VASH for veterans and other things. And so that is an example to me of leveraging, the federal government leveraging provider knowledge, which a lot of these ideas came from local innovations, paired with economists and other academics overlaying their expertise into things to show what works and as well as to continue to study it. So that would be an example I would point to say a time where we as a country and all of us have done a really good job of pushing forward a policy that makes sense and works.
Okay, Dr. Sampsonback, let me go to you and talk a little bit and get your perspective on sort of income cliffs, if you will, which I think we create a lot of in the federal government. And then we get mad at people because they're perfectly rational and decide they're not going to engage in some sort of behavior that we think is desirable that then costs them benefits. So their living standard goes down, even if their income went up, because we've been very inartful about designing an exit from a particular program to self-sufficiency, which is, I think, where we want to get as many people as we can. So can you give us some thoughts on what we can and should do? I think, we're having this problem right now. I'm sure some of my colleagues have the same problem. I can go through my district right now, and some of my employers will literally tell me, I can't get people to work here right now because the unemployment benefit is higher than I've historically paid them. And they're making the perfectly rational decision. I think I'll stay where I'm making more money as opposed to go back to work. And when I have to go back to work, I will. And we can argue a lot as to whether or not that's wages, although again, that's a big problem. I think you mentioned the $600, I know one of you did, $600 additional unemployment benefit we have. Believe me, that's one thing in New York City. It's quite another in Wewoka, Oklahoma. I mean, it really, the one size fits all geographically creates a real problem for you. So I know some of my colleagues might not even experience this problem because the dollars don't go as far in their respective areas and economies as it might in a relatively small town in rural Oklahoma. So anyway, any thoughts or guidance you can give us on this so we could be more constructive, really help people get to self-sufficiency instead of saying, we've got you to this edge, we're kicking you off, or we're mad that you won't jump off, even though you're going to end up with less benefits for you and your children.
Yes, so many great questions there. Let me start by sort of addressing your broad question about sort of what's well designed and what is less well designed. And I want to say that the sort of the two big workhorses for anti-poverty, especially for families with children, are the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. When I teach my undergrads, we always start by reading Milton Friedman and him thinking about what's our optimal way of designing a program. And he had a couple of things that he said. One of them was people should always be better off if they're working. So, when we have to take away have the resources, which we do, we have to phase them out, but do it slowly over time. And so then we pivot and look to see how is SNAP designed, how's the earned income tax designed, and they're really very much in line with exactly what Milton Friedman suggested, way back, 50 plus years ago. And there's a couple aspects of that. First, that the earned income tax credit actually gives people more than $1 back for every dollar that they earn for a certain part of it. And we have tons of research on this. As Heather said, mostly done by economists, in academic outlets. And we know that the earned income tax credit induces people to work, and then there's all sorts of other positive benefits that come from that. Similar.
The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. Yeah. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.
Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Konst. And if you thought that we got rid of that toxic idea, America first, when we got rid of Donald Trump, then think again. This poison runs deep in our blood, and it has disabled the Biden administration's handling of the COVID-19 crisis. Yes, America first has taken over the Biden administration. Listen to this comment just last week from Ned Price, the State Department spokesman under the Biden administration.
The United States, first and foremost, is engaged in an ambitious and effective and so far successful effort to vaccinate the American people. That campaign is well underway, and we're doing that for a couple of reasons. Number one, we have a special responsibility to the American people. Number two, the American people, this country has been hit harder than any other country around the world. More than 550,000 deaths, tens of millions of infections in this country alone. But there's also a broader point here that I made yesterday that it's, of course, not only in our interest to see Americans vaccinated, it's in the interest of the rest of the world to see Americans vaccinated. The point.
Yeah, he actually said, quote, United States first and foremost. That was not the Trump's State Department. That was the Biden State Department. Just last week. And let's just slow down and think about what was happening last week when Ned Price said United States first and foremost. The State Department's Ned Price. Let's just remind everybody, somebody who should be very, very tapped into what's happening globally. The United States had stockpiled a vast oversupply of vaccines, plenty more than we need to vaccinate every American, including kids, and regulators say that is including kids when regulators say that's okay. So this means the people who are refusing to take vaccines and the kids, we have enough to vaccinate people many times over. Our problem right now is no longer the supply of vaccines. It is the hesitancy of many Americans who take the vaccine, the first and sometimes the second dose. So even if President Biden's job, first and foremost, is to make sure every American gets vaccinated, hoarding vaccines won't make a damn bit of a difference. Yet when the COVID crisis took a frightening turn in India, with the virus spreading out of control and Indians dying on stretchers in hallways of hospitals, reminds us of last year, right? What did Joe Biden do? Who's, by the way, been here before because we lived through this last year. The Biden administration, specifically President Biden, did nothing for days. He stuck with his old strategy of America first and foremost. It didn't make any sense, not medically and definitely not politically. Now, I get the political situation. The Biden's folks are scared that Donald Trump will swoop back in and trash them for every decent thing they do for the rest of the world. Just the way they tried to keep Trump's cap on refugees. I doubt they actually even believe this. But they were afraid to give the Trumpites a way to attack them. Well, you know what? Okay, we cannot triangulate the way around doing the right thing. They did quickly, they quickly lifted that refugee cap, right? They did do that. That was what the Bidens did. But that was the right thing. Now let's do the right thing on COVID-19. So India needs our help. So does much of the continent of Africa and Brazil. And there are several steps that are quite simple. One, we have plenty of vaccines. Let's start saying a steady supply to those in need, not just AstraZeneca doses that aren't even approved to use in the United States. We can send Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson's vaccines and still take care of everyone in the United States. Second, the Defense Production Act allows the president to direct supplies in a crisis to where they are needed. It has made sense to use this in this crisis to accelerate vaccine production. But nothing about this crisis prevents the president from sending some of those supplies outside of the United States. He should, and he must. And third, and this is the biggest lift, the Biden administration should step in to enable vaccine manufacturing in less wealthy countries. This is the ugliest part of what has gone on during this pandemic. South Africa and India have been pressing hard to make it easier to manufacture more vaccines. They went to the World Trade Organization to ease intellectual property restrictions. The head of the World Health Organization said this was urgent, but the rich countries, including the United States, said, no way. I guess you could call this pharmaceutical colonialism. We in the rich world, we just know better. Here is their principal spokesman, Bill Gates, interviewed on Sky News about this subject.
There's been some speculation that the changing intellectual property rules and allowing these vaccines, as you say, the recipe for these vaccines to be shared would be helpful. Do you think that would be helpful?
No.
Why not?
Well, there's only so many vaccine factories in the world, and people are very serious about the safety of vaccines. And so moving something that had never been done, moving a vaccine from, say, a J&J factory into a factory in India, that it's novel. It's only because of our grants and our expertise that can happen at all. The thing that's holding things back in this case is not intellectual property. There's not like some idle vaccine factory with regulatory approval that makes magically safe vaccines. You've got to do the trials on these things, and every manufacturing process has to be looked at in a very careful way.
Public health expert, non-doctor, technologist, Bill Gates, who may or may not have some sort of incentive to disperse these vaccines through his foundation. Who knows? Okay, of course, manufacturing needs to be done safely, but here's the thing about Bill Gates. What's infuriating about this situation, first off, is that we're taking public health advice from Bill Gates. But does Bill Gates really want to believe India and South Africa don't know how to do that? Of course they do, because they already do it. They are among the largest manufacturers of all sorts of vaccines and pharmaceuticals. The majority of the pharmaceuticals that you receive come from India. Are you kidding me? This is not about safety. It is about monopoly capitalism. So no surprise, Bill Gates believes in monopoly capitalism. But again, we need to do the right thing. Lives depend on it. And frankly, the lives in the rich world, if you want to incentivize these rich capitalists, their lives depend on it. The whole world needs to be vaccinated. Are we still having this conversation? And Joe Biden has the power. He has the actual power to tell everyone that the right thing is to make it easier for everyone to make more vaccines. Now, that is what has to happen. We cannot end this global pandemic unless every single country, poor, rich, nemesis or not, have the ability to produce and disperse vaccines, but especially to disperse those vaccines. This is an absolutely ridiculous argument that we are making at this point. It is beyond apartheid. It is colonialism. And it's not even just colonialism because it has an effect on everybody, even in the rich countries. What good is it when all of us are vaccinated and there are some countries that are having the breakdown of 60% of those tested in India right now, of those tested are testing positive. That is where we were in New York City a year ago today. This cannot happen at this stage of the pandemic. And just because the politics, there are geopolitical situations happening does not mean that we suspend humanitarianism, especially if it has global consequences. All right, speaking of global consequences, we have a great show today. We are going to have Tassos Morfis on from Greece. I don't know what time is it? It must be late in Greece right now. But Tassos is going to come on to talk about the fascistic tendencies that are taking place in Greece right now, my home country. But no, it's fascinating. And we went from a leftist government in Greece to a right-wing government, and this is what you get. So we'll be talking about what's happening right now in Greece. And then later we have Jordan Zakarin on and Natalie Shure to talk about some pandemic politics, some mask politics, and a whole other set of politics that are happening today. We'll be right back right after the break. Welcome back to the Nomiki show. All right. We are not the only disaster when it comes to political situations and the police state. Of course not. That's the theme of the show. Over the last several months during COVID, Greece is not exclusive to this, but many hotspots around the world, we have had situations in which there is police that is cracking down on citizens in the name of COVID policing, I think is the best way of saying it. Tassos Morfis is the editor, co-founder, and president of the steering committee at Athens Live. Athens, of course, being from Athens, Greece. He is a reporter. It's a nonprofit on the ground source for stories from Athens and throughout Greece. He has worked as a reporter in Greek media and as a news producer for Fos Photos and foreign media, including Channel 4, CNN International, among many others. And he's here to talk about what's going on in Greece and why this is significant. I'm not going to lie, I'm a little biased, but I do think it's important given that just a year ago, no, 2 years ago, man, like time goes by so fast. Greece had a leftist coalition government, and then like that kind of fell apart. And now you have a what was deemed as a right centrist government that's turning out to be not so centrist. Shocker. All right, Tassos, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. I know it's very late in Greece, so grateful to you.
Hi,
well, it's like dinner. What am I talking about? It's dinner time. You're about to I don't know if you're under lockdown, but it's dinner time in Greece.
It's slightly later than dinner time. It's 10:30 p.m. But now in lockdown hours and time during the day has probably lost its meaning. So anyone does whatever they want. And I mean, we've been in lockdown since.
I'm sorry, anyone does
September.
whatever they want? That's very normal.
I mean,
who are you talking to?
If you're at home, then you probably. So many of my friends have started filming themselves at home playing the guitar, and I see them on my Facebook feed. And I'm like, wait, this person would never post something like this on Facebook. So this is what isolation does to people. I'm doing some shameless promo of my documentary. It's up there. It's going to be screening at Southeastern Europe Film Festival in LA. So if you are a US resident, you can watch the documentary. It's called Tide, and it depicts the story of sailors of one of Greece's major shipping companies, how it went bankrupt, and it depicts how Greece also went bankrupt through their struggle. So give it a shot.
I have to pause just for 1 second, Tasso. I apologize, but we're having some sound issues with you. Is it possible to change your headset?
Maybe I could turn off my headphones.
Yeah, we're gonna take a quick little break just because it's very echoey, so we might have to go to regular sound. Let's take one little break real quick. We're just gonna go pause to everybody. Apologies, everybody.
Is it better?
100% better. We don't even need the break. All right. We'll do it in post. We'll do it in post. Okay. So you have this documentary. It's about a shipping company. And of course, for those who are not familiar, shipping is it's a big business in Greece. Very big business.
What's really funny is that, I mean, it's not funny, it's really, really tragic and really sad, but the same thing, ship owners leaving the sailors in the vessels without caring for them, without paying them, and leaving them there stranded, basically abandoned. It's happening again now in a vessel that's somewhere in Asia, and they're Greek, actually it's an international group, but it involves Greek sailors that are trapped in the vessel and the ship owner doesn't do anything. So it's kind of, we see this happening again and again and again over time. And basically we made the documentary so someone from abroad can have a great, the great picture of what happened. But it's very sad to see that this keeps happening again and again.
I mean, okay, so that actually ties into the government now. So before we get to the current state of Greece and the Mitsotakis government, can you do a very brief refresher of the economic crisis? I know it's not a brief subject, but just to give people a sense of the state of Greece post-economic crisis and I say this because, you started off by saying everyone's like losing their minds in lockdown, but this is after a decade of tremendous stress and a generation or two now who have been deeply impacted by an economic crisis that has left very few options. And you say staying at home, that's that was existing before. People have to live with their parents, and now you're doing it in COVID. Like, how does that play out when there are no bars open? So can you give us a little bit of a cultural assessment?
When this whole thing started, we were kind of taking it as a joke because we've been through a lot, and people were saying, I mean, we stayed at home we lived with barely nothing for the last decade. A stupid virus won't make us suffer. And this is why everyone was very, very supportive to the government, and they were very cautious in their interactions, and they were supporting what the Committee of Epidemiologists were announcing in the news every night. And generally, there was a feeling that we went through the crisis. This is going to be a piece of cake for us. And this is exactly what gave the government a chance. This unity gave the government a chance to start literally a blitzkrieg. And I'm using this term because we're not talking about a neoliberal, we're not talking about a right-wing government, a centrist, Harvard-educated government. We're talking a government that brings back the worst of British political history. And we're talking about a neoliberal formation that has been sucking taxpayer money for the last year. I mean, most of the COVID handling has been a major failure, and you can see this simply by reading what the epidemiologists said when this whole thing started and what they say now. I mean.
So what is an example of that? Because I remember a year ago today, there were 0 cases in Greece. And of course, Italy was the epicenter of the world, and maybe a little bit earlier. And people said, how is it that Switzerland and Italy and France and Spain are doing so poorly? But what is it about Greece? Why? And they were, assessing cultural dynamics. I mean, there were so many different assessments of what was happening. So why was it that in April of 2020, Greece had 0 cases. Italy had all the cases. And now, a year later, it's not like it's an epicenter, but there's extraordinary fascistic, crackdown.
It's definitely a class issue. I mean, rich people brought COVID into Greece, and then because we needed tourism, to support our national business plan, we opened the gates to literally anyone without getting tested, without taking any precautionary measures. So after September, cases spiked, and the things that after September, we went again on a very, very strict lockdown. I mean, we're the only country in the EU where you need to text the authorities before you go out, and it's not a text message system that surveils you, but it's a text message system where you need to text, and if you're caught by the cops, you need to prove that you're aware that you went out and you're basically taking responsibility of your own action. So it's not about surveillance.
Let me pause 1 second. When you say go out, what do you mean by going out? Like leaving your home, going for dinner, going for drinks? Also, this is Greek culture, so people like to break the rules a little bit.
Leaving your home. Literally, you have six types of messages. From one, you text your address and your name, and numbers from 1 to 6. Meaning, if you want to go to the church, if you want to go buy groceries, if you want to run errands, if you want to go just for a walk, if you want a dog walk, and support the elderly or someone that is in need of help. And yeah, we've been under this regime for 7 months now, and it's quite shocking to realize that since late March, when charter flights from Europe started arriving in Greece, tourists can go wherever they want, while Greeks need to be at home at 9 p.m. And they need to text before they go out. So this is kind of crazy. And in fact, if you take a look at all the political data, meaning the facts about what's happening in Greece for last year, you can definitely see that the situation is deteriorating day by day. What's worse is that COVID has been instrumentalized in the worst way possible, not only to absorb state resources by the government and create a corruption system, actually enhance the already existing corruption system, but to create some new communities within this corruption system that will support the existing government and will give it a future. If you also take a look at what's being discussed among political scientists, you'll see that because there is no opposition, there is no strong opposition, they're going to be ruling for the next decade. And this is exactly what they're planning right now.
Really? Okay, so let's go back like a little bit of time. You have the economic crisis, right? That takes place, and this leftist government, a coalition government, center left, leftist plus left, Syriza, a new party forms, and has to undertake this economic crisis. It's negotiating with Germany. I mean, I would rather have you explain it, but they got voted out 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago now in the EU? And then so this Mitsotakis, there's a right-wing rebound after this because people did not feel like enough had changed. Is there any sort of public sentiment that, okay, maybe we should have given, I mean, is there regret? Is there an understanding of how austerity is not the solution? I mean, what I didn't understand about this whole problem with Syriza was they didn't do enough, but then the answer was to go with austerity, to go with privatization, to go with, I mean, this happens globally, but you're seeing it with COVID lay out so aggressively in a way that I don't think people probably would have expected with Mitsotakis. They probably thought he was like a George W. Bush, which is by no means good, but no Trumpian person.
But this is exactly why I used the term blitzkrieg earlier. I use it on purpose because it's not that the government is under pressure, is under an emergency, and needs to act fast. So they are passing legislation, they're handing out taxpayer money to their friends, or they're doing stuff so we are safe and everything functions. It's a strategy where you do your best in order to enforce your own people, your own tactics, your own mentality into governance and into the state. And this is much easier when you have no opposition. So let me go back to 2010 when the whole thing starts. It's a bit shortly after the housing crisis in the US. So in some way, our banks are being impacted by international funds and the whole thing collapses. We're going through some very, very difficult years with extreme austerity. And people are so fed up. The traditional political system is failing, and Syriza, this radical left party of the 3.5% is rising just because they promise solidarity. They promise benefits for the masses, and they're trying to work out some sort of a socialist program in order to make things work. They don't promise any radical left things. They don't promise any revolutionary fiscal reforms. They just promise a very mild social democratic fiscal program with some social aspects in order to get this whole thing balanced and help society and state move forward. But the thing is that they might have taken the government, but they haven't taken power. So there is a very unique phenomenon.
And when you say that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just for our audience that's outside of Greece, when you say taken power but didn't take the government, you mean they did not take the parliament? They took the parliament. They took the parliament.
They didn't take the state.
Got it. Okay.
So while they had the majority, they formed the majority government within the parliament, they were never able to infiltrate the state mechanisms. And even though they had 4 years to deploy all the strategy and deploy all their ideas and turn them actually into action, they stayed in this action and they pretty much didn't do anything. What they did, the big reforms were that they solved this issue with Macedonia. It's a very nationalist issue. It's very no one outside of Greeks and Macedonians will ever get this. It's about the name of Northern Macedonia. So Greece actually wants to somehow be responsible for the name of a neighboring country, which is pretty much insane. But anyway, Syriza solved this.
And there's a Trumpian kind of aspect to this, meaning there is a right-wing populist kind of response to this decision. Some say that they
absolutely.
Yes.
But let me come to this. This after that. And the second big reform that they did is that for the first time we saw benefits for the lower classes, and we saw reforms that would actually benefit those in need. And this is exactly the reason why they were accused that they were killing middle class. One of the main arguments of the opposition was that they were killing middle class, and because the main pool of voters is middle class, they were using this argument in order to create this very Greek thing. And this is exactly the point I want to make. They created this very Greek phenomenon of the anti-Syriza coalition, meaning traditional socialists, the right, the far right, neo-Nazis, everyone worked against Syriza, and this was depicted in the media. You have literally, actually in Greece right now, we have literally no digital media supporting Syriza, and we have only 2 newspapers, one investigative weekly called Documento and another daily called the Efemerida Pseudakton, which is the editor's daily, which are excluded from state funding, which are being accused of supporting Syriza while everyone else is supporting New Democracy.
New Democracy is the conservative government, yes. But there's also, I mean, this is no surprise to anybody who in American politics or otherwise, the media in Greece, just like everywhere else around the world, there's a direct tie between the New Democracy Party, the Conservative Party. Doesn't Mitsotakis have a hand in some of these spaces, like his friends and his allies own them?
So how this is done is by simply how advertising is being distributed. The government is controlling funds and is controlling how banks are distributing advertising to the media. And this is exactly how they are they're making their line heard in the newsrooms. What is very interesting is that Syriza tried to create their own media when they were in power, but they failed miserably just because they tried to do it the old-fashioned way. They tried to create mainstream media in a way that New Democracy was was always trying, and their own voters don't like mainstream media and traditional media. So that was a very let me put it kindly. That was an idea that just like didn't work. And now a New Democracy is coming after them with a parliamentary committee that's investigating this action by a former minister. So from the point they were trying to do something that would benefit, according to their opinion, the Greek public, now they are under scrutiny exactly for these actions. And for example, there is no investigative journalism fund that's supported by the state, taxpayer money. But I won't go. I won't go into how this thing has worked over time. I'll stick to the anti-Syriza phenomenon, which is pretty interesting because it derives from Trumpism. So there are blatant connections between Trump officials and Trump consultants with New Democracy. Steve Bannon was touring in Europe. I think it was last year or in 2009.
He had the monastery that he was using in Italy.
Yes.
During the EU elections, and his goal was to recruit and train, for folks who are not aware, he wanted in Italy to recruit and train people to run on the far right to take over the EU. He failed, but he planted the seeds, and then he was also pushed out of Italy. But he planted the seeds, and it's sprung up, globally, unfortunately.
And this connection is kind of obvious nowadays. When in retrospective see all the actions that took place, because they've been using exactly the same rhetoric. They've been giving a ton of money into digital media. If you take a look at Google's transparency report, New Democracy, the Conservative Party, is the second party in digital spend in Europe, which is insane. It is insane given the amount of money they owe to the banks, because New Democracy as a party is in debt. Another thing is that many of their ministers, they have publicly supported Trump, especially one figure called Adonis, who is the development minister. He was always supporting Trump when he was speaking during the time of the American elections, and he was happy about being a Trump supporter. Another thing that is very interesting is that for quite a while now, Facebook has been censoring political posts in Greece, and this isn't an algorithmic function, or this isn't something that's happening automatically. There's direct. I believe that there is a direct line between the outsourced moderators and the Greek government. So yeah, while in international press, the Greek government is basically portrayed as technocrats, liberal technocrats who have been studying in the US, and they have been getting scholarships.
I mean, so did Assad, but like.
It's exactly.
Do you want to play that game? I mean, come on, let's go through the list.
It's exactly the opposite. Yeah. And what we've been basically experiencing for quite a while now, it's what people call on social media, we are the Colombia of Europe, meaning press freedom dies, journalists are being shot and killed. Any kind of demos and strikes are being suppressed, heavily suppressed, and brutally suppressed. While the Greek government had plenty of time and they had many donors who wanted to contribute to supporting the Greek national healthcare system, which is a very robust. It has many weak points, but it's a very robust healthcare system. It's the Greek NHS, if I can compare it.
And it was just enhanced with Syriza. That was a big part of their campaign.
Exactly. They didn't do what was needed in order to create ICU beds, in order to hire more doctors, in order to get better equipment, and or just give some bonuses to the hardworking doctors who are in the front line. So yeah, after one year, I don't see mishandlings, but I see a Trumpian strategy that's being deployed, and basically it's lethal.
So we only have like a couple minutes left, very few minutes left, but it's interesting you say Colombia, because I always say Greece is like the Puerto Rico of Europe, and I get in fights with people in the US all the time. They're like, oh, but Europeans. I'm like, oh God, you need to understand Europe. There's Northern Europe and there's Southern Europe, and it is a very divided understanding. But for folks who maybe have never been to Greece, one piece of information that I find very similar to Puerto Rico is how educated everybody is. You have a generation, millennials and younger, highest educated per capita in Europe, right? And yet completely drowning in debt, living at home with their parents, and parents receive subsidies, just in basic terms, subsidies for food sometimes, and the kids will stay home with their, because they can, and then they go out and drink, and they well, when it's not COVID, there's we figured it out over the last 10 years in a very difficult way, but mounting debt, mounting the crisis is like present. It's not in the future anymore. This is a generation that is 40 and below and is stifled and stuck. And Syriza was supposed to deliver some results. And now you have Mitsotakis, who you just said, the right-wing government might be in power for 10 years. So if you're a 40-year-old who's lived through the last decade, who's probably been living at home with parents, most likely, statistically, may or may not be married and have children, even if they do, 10 more years of this, that's a crushed state. So I know we only have a couple of minutes, but how can the Mitsotakis government, in their right minds, seriously, think that this is a smart strategy, even for the worst capitalists? I mean, we're not in wartime. This is not my grandparents' generation anymore. These are, they're older than our grandparents were when they were in wartime, and then war ended. It didn't get much better, but it got a little bit better, right?
Yeah.
There was a civil war after World War II. It just, kept going. But there was something. And what I can't understand is why. What is Germany? What are the banks so obsessed with that they have to keep an entire generation of people who are likely to be under 50 in 10 years completely in survival mode? And just to add to it, what does the average person make per month in Greece right now? Do you know this off the top of your head? Because when I heard this number,
800 to 1,000 euros per month, while rent is 500, 600. So it's pretty much unsurvivable. But let me tell you something. If you take a look at I don't know how much time we still left, but if you take a look at the electoral data, you'll see that statistically, Greeks have been voting non-conservative parties. So progressives, they get something about 55%, while conservatives, they get something about 45%, which is a pretty big average. There's 10 points. You have a generation that has been working endlessly, and they didn't have time to go vote whenever they had a chance to vote. So in one hand, there is spectacle and capitalism that made them despise conservatism, but do not embrace any progressive ideologies. And the other thing is that Syriza proved a good solution for our parents, but it is not proving a good solution for us, like millennials and the people between 30 and 40. So the only solution to that is something that will cover this generational spectrum, and is going to be radical, and people are going to be able to identify with. They're going to be, the conservatives are going to be ruling just because there is no answer. There is no political formation that is able to give any viable answer to what's happening right now in Greece. And the left has been pretty boring, super boring.
But it seems like there's going to be a radical response to this. There's no other way. If you've had moderate left, Obama era, a little bit more progressive, but Obama,
it's brewing.
It has to. There's no other option.
Yeah. I feel like it's brewing. There's the former finance minister against Varoufakis who has launched a party called Mera 25 DM25, and it's going pretty well. It's basically a content production machine, and this is exactly how a good strategy to attract young people looks like. And there are now formations within the radical left around unity and around new ideas and how we can overcome all these traditional leftist communist parties.
Communist fights. I knew you were going to say that.
Exactly. So
old men of the Communist Party.
Things are brewing, yes, and we remain hopeful. I mean, today is a day when Gramsci died.
Oh, it is. You're right. Yes.
Yeah, and he's been a great fan of moderate optimism, pessimism. So let's keep being moderately optimists.
I approve. Tassos Morfis, please come back on. Would love to. I could talk with you for 2 hours if I wanted
anytime.
to.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Hey, I might be if I have my vaccine and I was just approved, and I have I'm telling way too much to the public, but I have a free flight to Greece that I was supposed to take last year. Because I like one of those situations where they're like, was anybody willing to stay an extra day in Greece and get a free round trip flight? I was like, yes. So I have one, and then I was supposed to use it last year, and I can use it this year. So I'm now that I'm vaccinated and they're letting me on the plane, I'm going to be one of your problematic Greek Americans that show up with their whole family. So we should at least meet up in person.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're waiting for you. We're going to be here stuck in lockdown. So
still, you'll be in lockdown and I'll be screaming from the bar across the street.
I mean, probably we're gonna get allowed to go out only if there's a tourist that invite us.
Of course, your Greek American families are going to be like, yeah, exactly. All right. Tassos Morfis, thank you so much. Go check out Athens Live. You have a great newsletter, fantastic newsletter that comes out regularly, briefs you on what's happening in Athens. Really great independent publication. Hope to have you on again very soon. And thank you for the comprehensive update. Stay safe. Go get some fresh air. Go sign up. Go take your dog for a walk and get some fresh air.
Bye.
All right. Kalinikta. All right, I'm going to do a quick ad because this is really important, and I'm going over time, and I'm feeling the pressure. All right, so you guys know, as we always talk about it, Sunset Lake CBD is our favorite product. I'm going to show you my little stopwatch. So this is my steps watch, but it is also my sleep watch. It's the only reason I put these things on me. I don't let them take pictures. I don't let them do voice recording or pretty much anything else except for take my steps in my sleep, because the sleep in particular is a problem. Last night I had 4 hours and 20 minutes of sleep. Yes, that is true, because I did not put my CBD in my water. Every night before I go to sleep, I put CBD in my water and I have a full night's sleep. But I was watching a Netflix show and I couldn't stop watching it. And the next thing I knew, it was 3 o'clock in the morning. And there you go. Sunset Lake CBD is a farmer-owned company that ships craft CBD products directly from their farm in Vermont that used to be a Ben & Jerry's farm and turned into a hemp farm. Yes, a premium hemp farm. They ship them from their farm to your door. They are supporting independent media, which is an incredible aspect of a small business. They pay their minimum wage at $15 an hour, and the employees own the majority of their company. That's crazy. They're progressive. They support shows like the Nomiki Show, The Majority Report, and the David Pakman Show, as you know. They also have a new product out right now, CBD dog biscuits. It has 3 simple ingredients, and I just heard that Sam Cedar actually ate them. I don't know why he would do that, but okay, fine. It has peanut butter, pumpkin, and oat flour, and CBD, of course, for your dog. And for those of you watching the show regularly, you know that my dog is a little neurotic, and COVID, being home with family 24/7 was amazing. And then when we started to go out and do things, he started losing his mind and biting his tail raw. So he had been living with a cone around his head for 4.5 months or so. And we kept taking the cone off, giving him a little CBD, trying to calm him down. He's finally coneless. So this is a really great product, huge progress. And this is why we would give him these treats, because it's the only thing that'll entice him to take CBD. It's a great product. We completely support it. Dorsey's supportive of it. I know we're running low on time, but I know that he loves taking the gummies. It helps him sleep. I love the gummies. I'm trying to cut back on sugar. Love Sunset Lake CBD. Go check it out. I truly mean this. I'm not lying. People ask me all the time. I have the products. I use them. It's definitely amazing, and they cut back on my migraines on top of it. You can use the promo code NOMI, NOMI, for 20% off of your entire order. Go to sunsetlakecbd.com. 20% off of your entire order, sunsetlakecbd.com. And Dorsey also loves the coffee. He talks about it all the time. Go check it out. 20% off, and our panel is here. And I am running so late, everybody. I'm sorry. Jordan Zakarin. Jordan Zakarin is now Jordan. What is your official title? I don't have your new title in here, but you've got a new thing.
The new guy.
The new guy.
Yeah.
The new guy in town. What's your new guy role?
What's that?
What's your new guy role? What's your official title?
I think it's producer. I'm not sure. Producer, maybe.
That's why we don't have it. Producer what?
Just producer. Media producer guy.
Oh, just media. Okay.
Yeah.
Media producer guy. Founder of Progressives. Not former of Progressive Everywhere newsletter. You're still doing that.
Yes.
Perfect.
Don't sleep.
All the things. This is what it means to be a millennial, is just do all the jobs at once, and maybe it all comes together and you pay your bills.
If possible.
If possible. We all get it. Natalie Shure she's causing a stir right now. She's lots of controversy with Natalie Shure having her on today. She is a writer around health, history, and politics. You've seen her in The Nation, The Atlantic, BuzzFeed, In These Times, Slate, Jacobin, and of course, Adam Maroon's Everything. She was previously over there. And you had this piece in The Atlantic about wearing masks. And then it's like Joe Biden read it. And he was like, I speak Natalie Shure. So now every time I want Joe Biden to do something, I'm going to lobby you. You are the person.
Yeah, well, today I wrote a column. It's for the New Republic. Today's column was about how Democrats should expand Medicare. So knock on wood. Let's hope that the new directive is about 2 weeks behind on that one too.
Just from now on, just say like, Dear Ron Klein, please read my article. CC all these. Here are the talking points below. And if anybody else wants to share it, go for it.
XO Natalie, right back soon.
All right, we're going to get to some other topics, but I do want to touch on this piece that you did have impact on. And I'm going to say, I love you. I didn't agree with it entirely, but not because I didn't agree with the science of it. You, of course, wrote this piece about like, okay, we don't have to wear masks out in public, outside anymore. What was the science behind that? The rationale?
I mean, I think that pretty consistently for a year, over a year now, the peer-reviewed research has been pretty clear that outdoor transmission is overwhelmingly rare. The times when it does seem likely to have happened generally seem like they were, very crowded gathering situations or two people commuting very close together over a long period of time, which of course is very different than just walking down the street, hanging out in a park. And that those situations, we really don't have any evidence at all that many, if any, cases have ever been transmitted that way. And so I think that it's time to stop wearing masks outdoors all the time, which isn't something that happens in every city, but it is something that happens in Boston and New York, as far as I understand, and a lot of other pretty dense cities where people really are wearing masks fairly universally, or were until people started kind of, relitigating the issue this week.
So I absolutely agree with you on the premise. I mean, in April of last year, I was sharing links with my parents about like, you can go outside and eat. Like I was trying to convince them, because I'd watched these explainer videos about how the virus had spread. With that being said, those are for people who believe in science and who can be, science is something reasonable. They're also probably likely the people who are going to get the vaccine if they can get it. I think my perspective on this that's confusing is it's not so much of a public policy perspective, but a public messaging perspective. So how much of what Dr. Fauci says, or the Biden administration says, the CDC says, or so many of these epidemiologists say, is really just to convince the people who may be on the fence about science to just keep your effing masks on. If you see people outside wearing the masks, it's just going to force them to wear the masks if they're not going to take the vaccine or otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there has been a lot of, politically fraught issues in the pandemic, and messaging has certainly been one of them. But whether or not someone believes in science and whether or not someone wants to show solidarity with other people has no bearing on the science of outdoor transmission. It's not as if I want to show how seriously I take the coronavirus and I want to support other people who are nervous, whether or not I wear my mask outside has no bearing on how at risk a person actually is, as demonstrated by a year of peer-reviewed research. I think that, a lot of people did push back and said, these are a symbol. It's important to show that we are still in the middle of a pandemic, that we're taking it seriously. And I understand all those things, but I don't think masks are a symbol. They're a public health tool. They're a public health tool that are valuable in specific certain contexts, indoors especially. I think that, we'll be wearing them for at least several more months indoors. And I think that that's important. And I absolutely agree with that directive. I think outdoors, we don't necessarily have to channel that message 100% of the time. And, showing what team you're on in terms of the coronavirus isn't going to reduce transmission if you're just incidentally walking by somebody.
I also love how, like, in New York, like, masks outside, but let's do indoor dining in December. Sounds great. Yeah. All right. Jordan, do you have thoughts on this or?
I just want to be clear. I'm not team coronavirus. But
pro or anti-coronavirus?
I'm anti-coronavirus. I just thought it was a funny way to say it. But
you wouldn't be
I would
allowed
say
on the
that,
show.
yeah,
Come on.
Here in New York, I would say, a lot of people are wearing masks. But yesterday I went out. It was as if like everyone read the news, right? Saw the news about the mask mandate, and like masks came off, and everyone was just smoking weed, and because now that's legal here too. And it was very strange to be like, where am I? I was fine with it, but it was like I've been inside for 14 months, and now people are just like, no one's sticking, everyone's smoking weed. It was very strange. The thing for me is like, it was fantasy land. The thing for me is being in New York. I don't know if I'm walking out the sidewalk and there's like a crowded sidewalk, do I wear it or not? I think that's for me. I've been trying to keep it safe because people are somewhat close. If I'm sitting in the park or somewhere, like if I was to be on a boat for some reason, I guess I wouldn't wear it. But I'm not going to be on a boat. But I think that's kind of my confusion, and I guess I have to do some of the reading there. But if science says we don't need to wear them, I hate wearing them. I wear them because I have to, so I'm happy to not. But yeah, just being in New York, I need to kind of figure out what is that? Is there like a middle ground there?
Also, are you vaccinated?
I am, yes. As a courtesy to others more than anything.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I also recognize, and without going, we could talk about this all day long. This is like now we're into like COVID therapy session. I recently had an interaction with someone who was like, I'm fully vaccinated. And they were wearing their mask. I'm like, I'm fully vaccinated. I'm in a 2-person situation with them. And I'm like, you don't have to, I'm fully vaccinated. You're not giving it to me and I'm not giving it to you. I don't think people understand how vaccines work.
Yeah, I think everyone's just very cautious. People are just like very, very cautious and spend like a year plus.
I'm an anti-vaxxer, just a side note.
Well, totally. That's different. But I think people are just very cautious and they don't want to seem like, we spent like a year calling everyone, understandably calling everyone that won't wear them or refuse to wear them kind of like a jerk. And so I guess better safer than, to be considerate than not. But I'm sure in the next few weeks, as it gets hotter and hotter, people will be like, well, I don't need this thing.
So I feel like we are here in a rational zone, right, of YouTube. It's a 0.1% part of the rational zone of YouTube where we're having real conversations. But simultaneously, there are people like the person who has the largest podcast in the world right now, a man named Joseph Rogan. You might know him from his physical shows that he used to do. I don't even know what they were. They were like obstacle course shows. You know what I'm talking about, right? Like he used to do all these stupid reality shows that were
Fear Factor.
Yeah. That one. Yeah. Like he'd eat like lizards and then like do an obstacle course and then like take some steroids and be like, I'm a man. That's his shtick in my mind. So he went a little viral yesterday, given that he's the most popular podcast host in the world, because of his takes on the vaccines and like who should take the vaccine, why they should take kids, like Kids don't need them. Nothing happens with kids. They don't transmit, COVID. Well, Dr. Fauci responded. And I think Dr. Fauci was listening to me because yesterday I was like, someone political has to respond, and the Biden administration or somebody needs to make this a political issue so that Spotify is like, Joe, you read a book. So let's play this clip.
So you have to put a little bit of societal responsibility in your choices. And that's why I disagree with Mr. Rogan under that circumstance.
Okay, it was very simple, but let's take this into a media conversation for a second, because we are dealing with a media space right now that is bloated on the right. We've talked about this many times on our show, that there is disinformation spread, whether intentionally or not. There's an issue where anti-intellectualism is being spread, and of course that has a very serious impact. Natalie, it's been interesting to watch this rise of the far right. Weird. I'm not saying Joe Reagan's far right, but he's like dancing with it. Seeing this rise up and seeing how folks storm the Capitol during a pandemic while we're dealing with like very harsh, like scientific truths, which plays into the conversation we had before. I mean, what is your take on how we like move forward on this? I mean, this is our next pandemic, our next, health crisis, which is bound to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's very frustrating to watch. I don't know how inevitable it was, because I've never lived through a pandemic of this scale, and nor have too many people who are able to discuss this now. We might have a few survivors. No, I guess we're probably out of survivors of the 1918 flu epidemic who can really remember it and speak to that. So, we're all kind of going through this for a first time. I will say, I think that Donald Trump as a president, and I'll say parenthetically, I always push back against arguments that insist that Trump is, this anomaly in the Republican Party, that he's completely unprecedented. I think, actually he is the ultimate Republican in a lot of ways and was the logical endpoint of the last several decades of the Republican Party. But I will say, I do think that with coronavirus in particular, he was a uniquely abysmal person at the helm. And I think that a big part of that is that a large part of how you'd want leadership to act is to sort of just step back, defer to the experts, and have good messaging. And I think that those are very easy skills that the vast majority of people would be absolutely fine doing. And Donald Trump happens to be awful at those things. I think that he's extremely bad at letting someone else take the wheel, at, letting them have airtime instead of him. And I think he's extraordinarily bad at offering, measured, credible messaging. And so I guess I would have loved to see all of this happen again with someone who was better at messaging, who, didn't turn all of these things into political footballs. And, part of my piece, and the piece that I think made people the angriest, I do think that, absolutely clinging to outdoor masking as enthusiastically as people have, and, as angry as people got with me, I think that there is a political element to that of some kind. I think that, I don't want to draw a false equivalency, but I think that Trump basically turning the coronavirus into, this silly pussy thing that liberals were getting overexcited about was horrible messaging, turning masks into this wedge issue, having people refuse to wear them. I think that the other side of that is people saying, oh no, you absolutely have to wear them in all situations, no matter what, for the rest of our lives. I think that people kind of dug their heels in on both sides. And that's, very frustrating. I think that we could have used more measured, scientifically credible messaging, and that includes, letting people know what some of the ambiguities were early on, as opposed to, I think overstating certain things the way that we saw early in the pandemic.
I mean, over the summer, I remember I drove from New York to the West Coast, and I went through like 8 red states, and then suddenly I hit New Mexico. I mean, I went from Texas to New Mexico. In Texas, I walked in to go get food to go at this restaurant, and this is over the summer. We've probably seen this a ton of times since then, and there were maybe 150 people in there. I walked in for 2 seconds in this stuffed Mexican restaurant, like packed, no masks on. Walked, I was like, not happening here. Walked out, like got a thing at a Starbucks to go and just like, lived at Starbucks for 3 days in a row. Then I went to New Mexico and it was mind boggling because everybody I saw on the street was wearing a mask. Mm-hmm. And the dichotomy was just like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to they walk towards you and then they distance by like 10 feet. I'm like, you're not getting it from me. We have masks on and you're 10 feet away and it's the summertime. But I think that's a perfect indication of just the political, it literally, like my brain couldn't wrap my head around like lunchtime and dinner time and like the two cultures there. Jordan, okay. So what's your take on like, how do we move forward in this incredibly partisan environment, this partisan media environment, a media environment that is, it's not just partisan, it is overwhelmingly, owned by versions of the right and capital. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, more shows like this. No, the thing is like, there's like financial and capitalism reasons there. Like OANN is and Newsmax are carried on cable and they don't make money for cable and they should not be. They should be optional. It's the sort of thing. I mean, there's talk radio that is dominated by conservatives across the country, and people listen to that as they drive further and further away to the things they have to do as rural America gets hollowed out. I mean, there's all these structural things that right wing takes advantage of. We talk about in Florida, the big Latino or the big Spanish language radio stations are now very right wing, right? And so these things keep happening, and it's not an accident, but it's not just a matter of like what our politicians are saying. It's what everyone around them is saying. I mean, Joe Rogan's the most popular he's remarkably boring, but the Fear Factor guy, telling, even though he had people eat horse rectums on his show, telling you not to wear a mask, like that's influential because people are listening to him. And so I think it's a matter of not just having our politicians say the right things, because a lot of times we don't know. Like I was washing my groceries right at the beginning of the pandemic, as people are like, yeah, take care of your food and wipe everything down. People were in like hazmat suits in New York. And so so there was bad messaging because we didn't know for sure. But I think it's a matter of like, there needs to be, I don't say you don't want to make like progressivism cooler or something, you don't want to make it like more macho, but there's an element of Americans love their quote unquote freedom, and being told to wear a mask is, a fight against that. That is, I guess people don't like being told what to do. And so I think it's a matter of the structural disadvantages in terms of media, and that needs to be figured out. And I think it's a matter of trying to figure out how do you message these things in a way that, maybe you need different messengers that are outside of politics, but message them in a way that's not like, you need to do this, wag your finger, yada, yada, at people. I think like I'm one of those people that would say like, you should wear a mask, don't be a dipshit. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said that on air. But but I think, there's the people that kind of reject that. And I think that, it is a messaging problem, but it's also a lot of structural problem as well.
Listen, the mask just gets in the way of your ability to stuff your face with meat all day. Because if you're a real man, if you are stuffing your face with beer that somehow has meat in it, I don't really understand that whole like plant-based beer thing.
I think, like
all beer plant-based.
Whether it's a mask or it's a gun, it's the last vestiges of freedom where people are just being beaten down by capitalism, right? Like you can't tell me what to do. People like we don't have the 4 freedoms that Roosevelt says we have. Like that stuff Roosevelt said we should have had, whether it's making money or having a safe home or environment or not being shot up in a store. This is like the last vestige, to say I have some independence over my life. I can carry a gun. I can eat a taco with my without anything on my face. That is
if you're white.
Right,
let's just be very clear. If you're a white man,
I'm talking about white men is what I'm talking about.
The Judeo-Christian world,
right,
as Rick Santorum said. Yes,
exactly. Yeah, so true. So I think like that's also a big problem, right? Like this is sold as freedom, and technically, I guess it's a kind of freedom, but it's because there's nothing else. Like if I'm not saying that it would solve hatred, I'm not saying it would solve ignorance, but I'm saying that like if things were a bit more equal, there's equity in the world, and like working people were not just being ground into dust all the time, they may not see wearing a mask as the biggest offense because they'd have other things in their lives.
Fair enough. It's makes sense. It used to be guns and meat, and now it's masks. Guns, meat, and masks. That's it. That's the new white man emblem. It's Tucker Carlson and Joe Rogan, and who's the third one? Who's the third? There's got to be a third guy. Oh, Jordan Peterson, obviously. and his like daughter in the background. All right, Natalie Shure, Jordan Zakarin. Sorry we went over today. It was like a very long show. Very grateful for your time and for your generosity. And next week, let's talk about the hearings. If you're down, if you're open, obviously, we want to talk about the hearings that are happening in terms of the algorithm, specifically like how YouTube and all these tech companies are specifically pushing forward right-wing, male-generated white content, and like how that disrupts our democracy in the way that Jordan just expressed. So stick around. You gotta watch that next week. All right, everybody. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. We have some shout outs. Ian Kinzel says, obligatory market incentive for having Natalie Shure on the show. Look at that. We got some love because of Natalie. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Prairie Fire Kowalski sends some love. Culture Sculpture. Nomiki takes CBD tincture at night and Red Bull in the morning. I don't take Red Bull. I do a usually some sort of cold brew. That's what I take, but it is 4:00 here, so it is not morning. I'll just say that. This is just normal Nomi. Shout out to everyone in the live chats. You guys have been amazing. Huge thank you to all of our moderators. You guys are killing those algorithms. The system that is just not set up for leftists, as you know too well. We can't do this without you, and for fighting off those trolls because they are coming at us. It's been a fun thing to watch. I don't always watch. I haven't been checking Twitter as much lately, but today I woke up to one and I was like, okay, that's going to happen on YouTube later. So we are so grateful to you. You make this space safe. Okay. This is a leftist safe space. So thank you for making it safer for all of us. And yeah, so tomorrow we will see you at 3 p.m. Eastern right here on YouTube and on Twitch as well. And thank you especially to our patrons. Go to patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. Please become a patron. It's how we pay for our show. It's how our team survives. It's how everything happens. It's how the lights are on. It's how we pay for Wi-Fi. It's how my computer stays going. It's how Dorsey, keeps going. That's how it happens. Patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. We will see you tomorrow. Stay in solidarity.
The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. Yeah. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.